Ariel Helwani, UFC 160 here at the MGM Grand with UFC President Dana White.
All right, let's do it. It's this weekend, Cain Velasquez versus Bigfoot Silva 2. What do you say to the people who say this is the rematch we didn't want to see?
Don't watch it. If you didn't want to see it, don't watch it. The reality is that Bigfoot Silva viciously knocked out Alistair Overeem. And I'll tell you what, if this was Alistair Overeem versus, Cain Velasquez, people would be going crazy. This is a guy who viciously knocked him out.
But in the history of the UFC, it's very rare that a guy would come back, get another shot at an opponent a year after he was annihilated. That was a beatdown. That was a bloodbath, right? Yeah, so how do you get people to believe that that won't happen again?
Well, here's one of the things that you also have to agree with is that the first time you fight in the UFC, you start fighting in the UFC, it doesn't feel like you're home yet, and you don't get those jitters out of you till a while. Bigfoot Silva has the jitters out, man, and he is a big guy. Anytime two big heavyweights go in there and start banging, anything can happen.
Are we witnessing a bit of a mini tournament here? The two winners, main event, co-main event, will they face off for the belt later on this year?
Could happen, yeah. It makes sense. Obviously, Mark Hunt has one of the best stories in sports, has put himself in a position. If he beats Junior Dos Santos, again, how do you not, like Bigfoot Silva knocking out, Alistair Overeem? How do you not give this guy? Who do you give the shot over him after he knocks out Alistair, right? So now the question is, if Mark Hunt beats Junior Dos Santos, how would you not give him the shot? And Junior Dos Santos, obviously one of the best in the world, you got to give him the shot.
How close was Mark to not making it here?
Not as close as people think. The good thing is that he tried to get in here 3 weeks early. He used the wrong passport. His other passport was down in Australia with his wife. He wrote out some paperwork, filled out some things wrong, and now, ever since that bombing in Boston, it's very hard to get into this country right now.
So he's fighting Junior Dos Santos. Junior wants the trilogy matchup. Do you feel like that's a fight that can actually, I know you were talking in the scrum about Texas and no big plans, but do you think, considering who Cain is and his background, considering how the first two fights went, considering Junior's appeal to the Brazilian fans, could that be a stadium fight? Could that be your first stadium fight?
That's a good question. I don't know, but it's a big fight and it's a fun fight. And if you look at the way the first fight went, you look at the way the second fight went, it is one of those fights that you absolutely want to see the trilogy.
And is it true that Roy Nelson was going to be the backup if Mark couldn't enter the country?
No, that's not true.
Because he was on the agenda. He got his license to fight on this card from Nevada last week, and he was the only non-160 guy on the agenda. So it was assumed that that's why he was kind of being tapped as maybe a backup if this couldn't happen.
Well, we talked to him about it, and from what I remember, maybe I'm wrong about this, I don't think he was crazy about this fight. I don't remember, though. I could be wrong.
Perhaps because it was short notice and he lost to him already.
Yeah, the way that I was looking at this fight was if this fight didn't, if he didn't get in the country, the fight probably wouldn't have happened. We would have made the fight later. But there was never a situation where I was like, oh shit, Mark Hunt's not getting into the country.
Speaking of heavyweights, you just signed Josh Barnett, and I'll always remember UFC 119 in Indianapolis. We were talking about PEDs, and then you just went on this tangent about Barnett. I didn't even ask you about Barnett, talking about how he was a bad guy and how he sabotaged Affliction and your issues with him.
He's the killer of promotions. That's what I used to call him. He's murdered more promotions than, In
a million years, I didn't think that you would, and I guess, never say never, right, in this sport or any kind of sport. How are you able to work with him now when you had those feelings about him 2 years ago?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've mellowed out, I think. Maybe that's it.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. I don't know. We came to a deal.
Have you talked to him? Have you settled your differences?
No, he and I, when he was with Strikeforce, we did the Fighter Summit. Bumped into the fighters. Remember, we took the picture and we tweeted the picture. That was the last time I've seen him. And I just accept the fact that, he's his own guy. He's done what he's wanted to do. And if you want to, Josh Barnett is one of those guys that doesn't want what everybody else wanted. Guys want to get in the UFC. They want to work the whip. They want to win the title. They want to, create a legacy, cement the legacy for themselves. I just have to assume, I don't know, we've never talked about it, that he's just not one of those kind of guys. He doesn't care.
So you offered him a contract after Strikeforce folded. He went out, shopped around, and then came back to you. Was it the same contract, or because he went around and denied the first one, did he get a worse contract?
I don't know.
I wouldn't know.
I wouldn't talk about that. I do know, but I wouldn't talk about that.
Who makes sense for him first up in his return to the UFC?
I don't know. I don't know that either. I mean, we really haven't. The thing is, he came off that hand injury against Cormier. He hasn't fought in a while. He wants to have a full camp, so we'll figure it out.
Have you talked to Nick Diaz about his up-and-coming promotion?
I have not talked to Nick Diaz, no.
Is this one of the more bizarre stories you've heard this year?
No. Nothing is ever bizarre with Nick Diaz anymore.
But considering the fact this is a guy who you talked about tax problems, things, how can he run a promotion? I mean, you're a promoter. You can give him some advice. Are you surprised that Nick Diaz is getting into this side of the business?
Very surprised.
You feel like it's his idea? Meaning, are there people behind him who are pushing him to do this?
No, I think that somebody probably came to him, said, listen, this is what we're working on. This is what we want to do. We'll make you the front guy. We'll pay you this amount of money. We'll do this. We'll do that. And Nick probably said, yeah.
You have a problem with it?
No, I don't have a problem with it at all. No, I mean, Nick claims he retired and, he wants to do something else. Good luck to him. This looks fun. It looks easy. It's anything but. Sometimes it's fun, and it's definitely not easy.
Do you think Nate Diaz was trying to get released to go fight for his brother's promotion?
No. Nate Diaz, Nate Diaz usually doesn't act like that. Nate Diaz is a good guy. He's not a bad kid. And, I've been with him for a long time through the Ultimate Fighter and all the fights and all the things and all the craziness that's gone on. I've always had a good relationship with Nate. I like him.
Anderson Silva was fined $50,000 for not showing up to a media day a couple of weeks ago. Have you talked to him about that?
Nope.
Do you have any idea why he didn't show up?
Apparently he has something better to do, so.
Does that bother you? Obviously, did you find him? But is this part of a new?
This is the new era, man. I said it last week. People are online bitching and people coming on Twitter and crying. It's gonna get worse before it gets better.
And this money goes to charity, right?
No. I mean, the money hasn't gone to charity yet. We haven't really decided yet where the fines will go, but charity makes sense.
Will Vitor Belfort's next fight be in the U.S.?
Yeah, probably.
Does it have to be at this point?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
No. I mean, people are saying that Vitor Belfort's fighting in Brazil because of TRT. Vitor Belfort's fighting in Brazil because he sells tickets. He sells out stadiums down there. That's why Vitor Belfort's fighting in Brazil.
And to be clear, he did have to go through extra testing, right?
Yes, he did. He went through testing. In training, he went through testing, and then he was tested again after the fight, and those results aren't back yet.
Did you have any issues with the way he behaved at the post-fight press conference?
I didn't know about it till we started this, the one-on-ones here today. One of the reporters pulled me aside and told me about that. And unfortunately, that's one of the problems with me not being at press conferences, because that would have never happened if I was there. So yeah, it's something I gotta deal with.
So you're not okay with that? You don't think that's a proper way to answer a question?
Only I threaten reporters. The fighters don't.
Yes, of course. Just a couple more things before we let you go. Nick Newell is a free agent. You remember Nick Newell, the fighter who's missing one hand?
Yes.
Are you interested in him?
Am I interested in him? I wouldn't say no. I don't know. That's a question for Joe and Sean.
You don't know enough about him to really weigh in.
Exactly. I know who he is. I've heard of him. But yeah, I don't know enough about him.
Okay. And by the way, why do you keep changing your Twitter icon? Keep changing it all the time.
Oh yeah, I had the same one for a long time, and then I changed.
Very confusing.
I changed it for the Boston Strong.
Right.
That's
you
why
changed it again.
And then I changed. I did.
Yeah. Now you're like walking out of a plane or something.
Well, yeah, it's going to be that one for a long time. Get used to that one.
Okay. It's hard to keep. You see a new picture, you're not used to it.
Yeah. So, our media people were trying to tell me, you got to change your picture more. I don't like changing my picture. I changed it. The reason I changed it was for the Boston thing. Okay. And now I got this picture. I'm happy with this one. This one's going to be there for a long time. I'm sorry that was bothering you, but
I've been waiting to ask this for a while. Okay, last question. John Cholish, Jacob Volkmann, they've been talking about this. And honestly, I don't think that John, his issue was about the tax. I think he was talking about how he ended up losing money at the end of the day because of the fact that he had to fly out his cornerman, because he had to pay for their hotel room. Yes, he signed the contract, Brazil, all that stuff. This is not the first time someone has complained about money in the past, but does he have a point in your opinion, or do guys just have to deal with it and work their way up in your opinion?
You just answered the question yourself. The guy supposedly works on Wall Street, okay? And he signed a contract to do a deal, 4 fights, not 4 fights, but to sign a deal, 4 fights. And is now saying somehow he's, this contract was a bad contract and he wasn't making enough money and all this stuff. Everybody starts somewhere. Guys who spend, $60,000 to $130,000 on college end up with all these, bills. They end up with a ton of bills that they have to pay back for school, and then they go get a job, for $22,000 a year and start their way out and start to work their way up the corporate ladder or whatever it might be. Guys like me, I didn't go to college. I didn't want to go to college. You know what I mean? I didn't like it, and I didn't want to do it. I walked out of a job one day. I was a grown man. I was 19 years old. I walked out of a job where I made money, I had benefits and all this other shit because I wanted to be in the fight business. You know what? There were no assurances. There were no guarantees. There were no promises. There were no anything. This guy's a grown man who claims he's educated, signed a deal, went in, did it, didn't work out too good for him. He wasn't good enough to be there. And now he's pissed and he's bitter and he's upset about these choices he made as a grown man. What do you want me to say about that? What's the answer to that question?
He just told me that he's in Las Vegas now for a work-related function, and he is extending the offer to meet with you face-to-face to explain his position. Are you interested in meeting with him?
For what? What's the point?
Because he has said negative things about the UFC, so he wants to explain to you face-to-face.
Well, here's the deal. If he was unhappy here, he signed a deal and on his own came to fight. He decided he wanted to be a fighter, decided to fight, got into the UFC, and doesn't like how the whole thing turned out. I mean, I don't even, what is there to discuss? What is there to talk about? Then you have, he was given the same opportunity. George St. Pierre, John Bones Jones, Cain Velasquez, and the list goes on of all these other guys who have made it and made tons of money and everything else. He had the same exact, could have come in and become a world champion. Wasn't good enough to be a world champion, so it didn't work out for him, so on to the next. Then you got Volkmann, right? You brought him up too. Bitching about his health insurance, okay? Well, you tell me, is the Bellator health insurance better? Is World Series of Fighting's better? Is Top Rank's better? Do they have a better plan? This thing's for injuries. You blow your fucking knee out, guess what? You're going to be cheering at $1,500 deductible. It's impossible to insure 375 Ultimate Fighters. We figured it out and we got it done. So guys in the old days that were blowing their knees out and all these things that were happening that had to go out and try to figure out how to pay for it or get some cheap surgery can now go out and get the real surgery. You know what I mean? He says he's going to expose us. Expose what? That we pay fighters more than they're supposed to be paid, that we actually give them more money, and if an event does well, we give them even more money, that we're the only fucking promoter in the history of the world that has figured out health insurance for their fighters. He's going to expose us for that. He's going to expose us for what? I don't. Then if you want to start comparing other sports, there's guys who wash out of all sports. NBA, NFL, hockey, soccer, everywhere. And of course, guys who don't make it are never going to be happy. Guys who aren't going to make it in these sports, and you don't get to live your dream. You don't get to do what it is you wanted to do. The NFL makes $7 billion a year in TV revenue. We don't make that kind of money, right? And the NFL doesn't pay for their own production either. We do. This business is so much harder than any of these idiots on the internet or anybody else understand. It's a very difficult business. We figured out how to make it work.
The UFC is back this Saturday. Another huge Memorial Day card. Cain Velasquez versus Bigfoot Silva 2, this time for the heavyweight championship. And then the people's main event, Mark Hunt versus Junior Dos Santos. Thank you very much, Dana.
Thank you.